Hello, and welcome to the first episode of The Exchange, a show where I'll be talking to artists and creatives about their lives and work. My name is Greg, and today we're joined by a multi-skilled Glasgow-based artist, but I'll let them introduce themselves.
Yeah, so I'm Amy. I am sort of the creator of Miserable Beasts. So I guess I'd say I'm a kind of doll and puppet maker, but I kind of like to dabble in all different types of art that is sort of creature related and character related.
Yes. And is it characters really that are the thing you're most interested in making with that?
Yeah, so I've always been like super interested in characters. A lot of the ideas from my Miserable Beast sort of came from like things I've been interested in as a kid. Like I've always been super into monsters. Like cartoon monsters. I was a big fan of Skeletor when I was a kid, and I think that might have been one of the first puppets I made. So I'm kind of really heavily inspired still by those things. But I guess like character is something that I'm really wanting to work on, like going forward in my work. I've been very like sort of model making based, but I'm kind of wanting to bring more story elements to build like characters with a bit more personality and background. So that's something I'm sort of working on at the minute, I guess.
So for some context for people of what you make the models, you've got dolls as well as marionettes and stuff.
Yeah, I started, I think, I've been a model maker for some time. I think I did illustration at uni as an undergrad, and I ended up making models for my final project there. It was a project based on the book Steppenwolf, and I made some models like in a magic theatre for that project, and that's kind of where it started. At the time I was really into, I don't know if you've seen it, but some stop motion artists called the Quay Brothers. They kind of used like old dolls and stuff to make stop motion animation. And Jan Svankmajer, I watched a film called Faust, and that was really the first thing that
I do know Faust, actually.
Yeah,
where a woman turns into a puddle.
yeah. So it kind of incorporated that and some of the Czech puppets, marionettes. So that was really my first sort of interest into like marionettes as opposed to dolls. So I've sort of kind of juggled those two things as something that, I like to work on. My personal thing, I love the marionettes, but as a creative business, I think a lot more people have got room to display art dolls. So I kind of developed making those, to give people an option to just have a piece of art that can sort of sit in the home.
Yeah, with a bit of personality.
Yeah. But puppets are I don't know, it's bringing them to life, I guess, and I just find it really exciting when it's finished and you can do that. But yeah, I sometimes find it hard to have the time and commitment to make the puppets because, I don't know, as an artist, sometimes you're always struggling against what might be profitable, and it's a bit of a
business against the passion. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. And I feel like I've struggled with that for years. I'm not particularly very good at asking for money for my art as well, because it feels like something that's just very for me. So
as a professional, does it feel like a job when you're creating, or is that very dependent on the project?
I'd say it was very dependent on the project, but I definitely find that the more pressure I feel, for it to become, financially viable, the kind of more it sucks away from like the feeling of what I really want to do. And I've struggled in this cycle, I guess, for quite a few years now of like flip-flopping between thinking that I can make it work as a business and then trying to have something part-time and so I can get the love of it back. So I'm still kind of going in that at the minute. I just got a part-time job because I want to get back to, like I said, the character stuff, and that's going to take me a bit more into like development and things where I can't necessarily make the money from it, or not as much as I'd need or like to. So yeah, I think that's like I can imagine for many people who have quite a niche kind of artistic interest.
Yeah. I want to come back to that sort of struggle to get things going, but also mentioning film being like an inspiration for what you like about puppetry and stuff. So it's the Jules Holland question that I'm stealing here, love. But what's your sort of first memory of engaging with art and that then?
I think, well, I used to make a lot of kind of models, paper mache models with my mum when I was a kid. The Nightmare Before Christmas was like a big, massive one for me to like get into modeling. I remember we made a Jack Skellington figure out of pipe cleaners and paper straws and a ping pong ball or something. But yeah, I did a lot of sort of paper mache and stuff about film characters when I was a kid, like making like Star Wars helmets out of newspaper and stuff. So I think I've always been lucky that, you know, my mum spent time with me to do that when I was young. So but yeah, I don't know, I can show you the picture, but there's a picture of me as a kid with some big monster head. Like, it's just been ingrained since I was a child that I just want to make monster faces. I guess it's, yeah, a lot of the toys I had then have been a massive inspiration, and I've always wanted to like make something for myself, you know, every time I see something exciting.
And was that your mum a creative person as well, or just facilitating your interests? Come from?
Well, she was. Yeah, she was, but she wouldn't. I guess she wouldn't consider herself as much as she was. She spent a lot of time with us doing it, but yeah, she was a teacher, but never like actually pursued any kind of art career herself. But yeah, I do remember doing a lot of paper mache, film props when I was a kid.
So was that sort of an idea when you were young that you wanted to do film props? You wanted to go into filmmaking with that?
Yeah. So that was, I guess, when I was still at high school, that was like my sort of dream career. But yeah, I remember I was heavily into Pirates of the Caribbean when I was, well, I think 13 when that film came out, and I really wanted to get into that. But when I left school, I don't know, I had a lot of problems with my mental health and anxiety, and, you know, I wasn't confident or able to go to uni to do exactly what I wanted. And I guess that's when stuff kind of got a little bit off track. You know, people at college were like really encouraging of doing that, and I wanted to do costume design. But it was the advice given was that I should go into fashion design with business and marketing because it would be a more viable career.
Yeah.
But I just was not. I went on the course. I stayed at my hometown to do the course at uni because I just felt like it was the next step. I just kind of felt like I had to go to uni at the time, even though I was nowhere near ready for it. So I went to do this course, and I'd only lasted a year on it because I just couldn't get my head around the business and marketing thing. I didn't really sort of gel with anybody else that was on the course. So I switched on to illustration. And when thinking about it, I don't know why I did this at the time. It was just like wanting to get that uni finished.
Yeah.
So yeah, I did that, and I sort of lost what I didn't have that feeling I did when I was young, and I still thought that I'd be able to do all the things that I wanted. It then got kind of hard, and I just worked in retail for a few years, and then ended up eventually went to Dundee to do a master's degree in forensic art.
Dundee.
Yeah, Dundee. But yeah, that was like, I kind of started finding my feet in Dundee because I'd had a really rough couple of years there, which is actually something I'm kind of wanting to explore in my work, that I'm working on at the minute. but yeah, I got a lot more experience doing model making through that course. I decided that was kind of what I was going to focus on as my like personal growth. And then I did get the opportunity to work on some short film things and props, and after that I worked at a sort of special effects makeup school in Manchester, like as a casual helper for a while, but I just felt like I didn't have the personality for it. You know, it was a very like cutthroat thing. You had to you project yourself forward and say, look at me, I'm great at this, and like really keep pushing for opportunities in that. And I just don't have that in me, you know. I kind of wish I did, but I'm very much I find it very, very hard to put myself out there in terms of like skills and stuff. Sorry.
No. From my perspective, especially in the creative world, and the blockbuster, the front page of art, whether it be films or the illustrations that you see, it is the people that have a lot of confidence and a big voice who you see up front, whether or not, you know, their work warrants it, to personal opinion. And, you know, I think there needs to be more introverts.
I'm definitely for more opportunities for introverts. I think sometimes I get frustrated how big of a like barrier, you know, being introverted has actually been for me. I felt like in when it comes to stuff in my career, like it's frustrating because it's not necessarily something that is really talked about. Like I mentioned briefly about some of my mental health problems, but you know, a lot of this has made this barrier. But I think just being a general introvert and finding it really difficult to, you know, put myself forward for things, and the whole imposter syndrome feeling that comes with that you always feel like you don't, you know, you're not quite there, or you're not quite ready, or you need more and more and more, and you just end up withdrawing and sort of trying to do all that more and more and more yourself, and then it becomes even harder to put yourself out there because you've had no feedback from anybody for all that time. So I think being an introvert is, you know, quite a big barrier to access things like that.
And, you know, one of the things that I really love about what you do, whether it be your the dolls or the blog posts you make, is you're very open about how you're feeling at the time with your creative work or just within yourself. And as a consumer, it's nice to see you know, someone speaking so openly about that. You can relate to that, and it comes through the art. Does the creating, is that like a distraction from those feelings? Is those feelings the driver to create?
I think it's a bit of both, but I really, really appreciate you saying that, because you know, it's quite a new thing for me, especially the blog post, and especially, you know, putting myself out there as a person, like, and not completely hiding just behind my art all the time, because it is very connected to that in both ways, I guess. Like how I feel about things can influence my work, but equally, you know, I can use that channel sometimes to help me process some things. So it's kind of like a two-way path with that, I guess.
Give and take.
Yeah, and it's nice. Sometimes I was really anxious the first time I started writing on the blog, but I was like, no one will read this, so it doesn't actually matter. Like I just I'd finished the therapy and I didn't have access to that anymore, so you know, it was just kind of almost the same thing, like just a space to, and you know, through that it was sort of a practice skill, turning up and having to sort of speak about things. And I think it's quite important. You know, for me, it's been very important that I've had to learn how to sort of be open and not be so afraid of what people think of me. Like I'm still I'm still afraid. I'm still always afraid, but I definitely do get something out of being able to talk about these things, and equally have like people like yourself like actually acknowledge that it means quite a lot to me. So
well, things about the fear is that it's completely reasonable that you're afraid of putting yourself out there.
It's terrifying.
But once you've done it, well, it can feel good and then it can feel bad. But you know, you never know. Like each one of those likes when you put a post up saying out your struggles might be someone who's in the exact same position. So that's where I think it's really valuable for people to be open that way.
Yeah, I think that's what made me do it originally. Like I had a really bad bout. I struggle with health anxiety, but I had a really bad time of it. Maybe a couple of years ago, I did go back to therapy for it, but I'd seen just some random blog on the internet that someone had posted about their experience, and I was reading that, and I was like, this is exactly what this is feeling like to me. And you know, a lot of people in my life at the time didn't really understand that they were not understanding how real this problem was to me. So I'd felt very like alienated by the people not understanding that. So reading that blog where I was like, this is it, this is how I feel. Like I didn't know that person, I never spoke to that person, but it really did give me a lot of reassurance in that time. So that's why I thought, you know, someone might benefit from me doing that.
And from racking up some followers, it definitely has, most likely.
It's been nice. It's been nice to have the positive feedback on like my personal things, because it's always hard for me to put me out there like alongside the work. But you know, a lot of people who have supported me through Miserable Beasts have just been so great that, you know, I'm actually, every time I'm like really in shock that someone's even bothered to read the blog. So, you know, it's a super, super nice feeling, and it does encourage me to keep being more open and do the things I want to do.
And just coming back to those sort of negative feelings in the artwork, I remember in the start when the Instagram started, and it was the paintings of the different beasts. There were saying there were personifications of different emotions at the time. Is that still sort of what you feel when you're putting the characters? This person is, or this character is the troll, or whatever is the embodiment that I'm feeling of this and that. Is that still an element that goes into it?
Yeah, I think a miserable beast, like it obviously is born because at the time I was a very miserable beast. And I think those initial pictures, you know, they were just sort of quick Posca marker paintings of just how I was feeling. And that definitely was when I was like in the pits of health anxiety. I was just convinced that I didn't have long left, and I was really worried that I'd not done anything that I really wanted with my life. So I'd put a lot of pressure on myself to be successful before that. And I think that was me sort of unraveling that fear and being like, look, just put down what you're feeling. It doesn't have to be the perfect thing. It doesn't have to be the thing that will get you a career. It doesn't have to be anything. Just do something for you, how you feel, and sort of kind of unravel that perfectionism and just post it. So yeah, the feelings in that were definitely like that. And then I got the opportunity to sort of grow that into puppets and dolls, which have always been very much, you know, it's a mixture of feeling and personal influence from my past things that I like. But yeah, I think maybe recently I have felt like I've started to lose that a bit, and which is why I wanted to backtrack and do something more personal to do with characters and story. It's not so much coming from a feeling, but it's I want to tell a story of a part of my life using some characters, and it's just going to take a little bit more thought. So that's the project that I've kind of started working on since I've, you know, got this other job to support me, which is actually been really great because it's working in a comic book store, so I get to be around a lot of things that inspire me. So yeah, it's quite a nice job to support me as somebody who has been quite isolated for a while. Like I've met people who, you know, have got their own creative outlets, and I feel quite at home there. And I think hopefully it'll be good for me, and I can progress my projects where I want them to.
For your inspiration to keep creating, do you find that being surrounded by other creatives and arts is something that really pushes you, or do you find that only with, because I know that my brother's partner, my brother's an animator, storyboarder, and partner is an animator as well, and what she's been doing is having like a media cull where just
I can believe that.
I feel like there's a lack of original thought. I'm just going to stop engaging with everything, but try and still keep engaging with art, have my own feelings, my own thoughts coming out. Do you find that you have that side of it, or more creatives you're around, the more creative you can be?
I absolutely have that side of it, and I think that I tend to withdraw from media or social media, and I try to be inspired by, either memories from the past or other things. Like, I love other artists, and there's loads of other artists that I admire so much. But a lot of people always ask me, like, oh, what artists are you inspired by? And I really try not to be inspired by artists, because for me, I can appreciate it and I love it and I can see it. But if I start to take on being inspired by other artists, I get it becomes a thing where I am trying to be as good as, or, I try to fit into a mold that I think, oh, this artist is great and maybe I should be more like that. And that's when I start kind of losing
your own identity.
So I get that. But I think in my own personal life with people that I know, it's nice for them to sort of push me a bit, and they can push me in an encouraging way where I'm like, oh, they're doing this, that's really nice, how inspiring, like, I'm going to do something as well, so we've got something to talk about. But also in a like, I can be a bit like, oh, they're doing this, so I should get my shit together and like try a bit harder. So I think knowing people in my real life, just a few people to hold me accountable for what I'm doing and ask, like, how's that project going? And I can't be like, oh, well, actually, I've not done anything on it. Like, that is a push, but I think I can definitely get overwhelmed with too much creativity coming at me.
Being someone who switches between mediums quite a lot, because you're illustrator, painter, model maker, you started 3D modeling recently.
Yeah,
so you jump around a lot. Do you find it hard to stick to one thing for a while? And is that because of pressures, or is that because of an intrigue to jump to something else?
I think that I don't want that to be a problem, but sometimes it definitely feels like it's a problem. I really, really struggle with staying on task. Like, it's no diagnosis of anything, but I just can't with stuff. It's partly just I get sucked in and I think, oh, that's cool, I want to have a go at that. And it's partly just because I like variety. Like, I like the variety in, different mediums. Like, how am I supposed to know the best way to tell something if I haven't
tried them all?
Been able to do everything. And that feeling of, oh, this might be the wrong thing. Like, this might be the wrong thing to be doing. Maybe I should do that. Maybe I should do that. Like, those thoughts get in my ear all the time, especially when I'm trying to think, am I doing art for me? Do I want a career out of this? Like, what's the best thing to do that's going to make this work for me? But I have a real problem committing to, well, anything really. I've got big problems with commitment in general, but like, I find it really hard to pick a project and think this is what it's going to be and see it through, because I get so distracted by other things. So I think I've met some people now that I'm trying to help hold me accountable to this project that I really want to do, and so I'm not going off and doing God knows what else I've decided, you know.
And the project you're working on just now, more narrative, character based, is that going to be involving marionettes and puppetry, more illustration?
Yeah, I was probably going to try and make it more illustrated, but I'm not fully decided on how I'm going to go about it yet. I definitely want to work on my illustration more, but I think in a way I started to feel like the puppets have become sort of more precious to me, that the puppets are kind of now like I want to take all kind of pressure off them. So the best puppets I was making, and the way I felt the best about them, was when it was very much a side project and I just felt like doing it. And I think because of the scale of the project that I'm trying to do with the storytelling elements, like that for me I'll have to work quite hard to stay committed and stay on track for that. So regardless of it not being a paid job, it's likely to start feeling like work, because I can be very like glitching about with stuff. So if I'm going to have to keep being pulled back down to earth to get this project done, and I really want to do it, like I really want to feel like I can succeed in this, I think I might just keep making the puppets as just something that I do as a sort of escape and a break, and something that's just for me, really.
With the puppets and the fact that they do get characters and you pour effort and emotion into them, and being a profitable artist and trying to do it full time, you've got to have income, so you've got to sell your work in some way. Do you find it quite hard, because making model making, you are making something bespoke that you pour some time into? Is it quite hard letting them go and knowing how to price them?
It's incredibly hard, and it's I've done a few other model making projects for different kinds of clients. Like for a while I was making like surgical simulation models, and they were very, very different in terms of how I'd have to price that, and it just feels like a minefield depending on who the client is and what they've got. And I think for something so personal like puppets, a lot of the people, collectors, they're just people who like art. It's not for a business, it's not for necessarily people that have got loads of money. So I know for me that I have not that much disposable income from what I do. So I think because they're personal to me, it is hard to price them and give them away, because I guess I do see the puppets as very much a hobby. It's hard for me to see myself as a model maker in the same way as if I made something for a museum or I made something for a medical company. So it's very difficult for me to try and translate that into a business where I'm selling them. I've really enjoyed doing people's commissions for that, when they've got a nice budget and they know what they want to spend on it. But when I'm just making them for myself, it's hard to price it.
To give people an idea of what's actually involved in model making, could you take us through the steps of making either one of the troll dolls or a marionette?
I think the first thing really is there's a lot of like pre-experimenting with materials. A lot of money is spent kind of upfront buying materials and using different materials. Through other jobs I've done, I've kind of had the opportunity to experiment with materials and learn how to do that. But when I was learning that, I did throw a lot of whatever money I had into just trying things, because model making materials aren't cheap and things don't go right off the bat. I think the sort of research and development into materials and like what works for you and what works for the sort of style you want to create is probably like the biggest first hurdle. I watch a lot of YouTube videos of other people doing other crafts and then try to pick out things that work for me, and then you get a combination of things that you sort of feel good about and how
becomes
that
your
works.
style.
Yeah, but I feel there's a lot of the most time and effort goes into that, goes into the sourcing the materials and working out what you need and what works together. And then once you've got those things, obviously it's an expense, but you know how to use them and you know how to work with them. So say for the troll dolls, the polymer clay, I used a more expensive polymer clays, but I used the Fimo for those. Like there were better, not necessarily better, but more professional types of polymer clay out there. But I think because I was trying to do something that was quite childlike and naive, the Fimo is not very nice to use as
you want that to come through with the materials as well.
Yeah. So I chose that material particularly because it's kind of hard to sculpt with realistically. Like it's very gummy. There's other clays that you can get a lot more detail, a lot more easily, but I specifically chose that because I was trying to bring a more like childlike naivety into my work to like negate that perfectionism I had. So the clay was the first time I made a puppet. I was like, this like making something out of chewing gum, and it was and I was like, this is absolutely awful. But then what I'd made, I was like, awful in like a good way though, right? So I ended up just like sticking to that clay. But that was kind of the experience of how I chose that. And I think for anyone wanting to do model making, that the first part about it is just playing with things. And then a lot of people ask me if I like draw the characters before I make them, and strangely with the model making, I never design on paper before I make it. The process is kind of about it sort of forming as it goes along and getting the feel of the character like while it's in your hands. Exploratory
while you're actually working.
Yeah, I think for puppets I tend to do that. Like I don't draw them first because I think for me if I drew something on paper, then there's a very pressure to make it look exactly like how it was on the paper, and it becomes a different kind of process.
Have you I want to come back to the process and the cost process and the fact that people often don't appreciate with art. I'll do that now because I've gone on about it. Like, there is the outset for the materials, the labour, the time put into it. Never mind the skill that you have having developed it. Your skill is valuable. You wouldn't want to be paid minimum wage for something that you are good at. And if a company hiring you for work who has the budget to pay you appropriately, that's great.
Yeah.
But especially we're in the economic situation that the world is in at the moment. I think. Do you think arts is suffering from that? People can't afford to put money towards art.
I do, because I think having art is a luxury. It's a luxury item, really, at the end of the day. So I think, for me, those kind of things are the first things to go if you're paying your bills. And I know for me, I've never had like a lot of disposable income. From when I was doing the surgical models, that was, a much better paid job. But like from trying to do art for me, I've always really struggled making. And I would not be able to afford my art, so it's really hard to price something when you couldn't afford to buy it yourself. And I think that's always sort of been a bit of a barrier for me, pricing things, because I know how expensive it feels. I know it might not be like that to somebody else, but, I look at what I've made and I think, I couldn't afford to buy that. Like, even with me pricing it in a way that would support me, I'd still not be able to buy it. So I definitely think, I guess it's about finding an audience. There are people out there, we know people out there that do have a lot of disposable income, but I tend to be, especially my personality, I end up drawn to people that are in very similar situations to me. So finding clients with...
It is a stereotype about artists not having any money and being friends with artists who don't have any money. But the idea of art as a luxury, I always find interesting, because I don't think nothing's enjoyable if you don't have any element of artistry or design and things.
Yeah.
Everything we consume has that. Yet it's considered a luxury for our own homes and being.
Yeah. I think it's even kind of a luxury as a hobby. Like, some of the materials that, that's kind of what I've had all my life. I've always spent extra money on trying to learn new things, or materials, or playing with. Like, that's kind of what my money has always gone on. As an introvert, I don't have a massive social life. I don't really get out, multiple times. I don't really go out for meals, or that's not where my money goes. So
Fimo or a drink, take the Fimo.
Yeah. I have had money generally. It's kind of been thrown back into reinvesting in me trying to somehow just survive without not having to do art. But yeah, I think it shouldn't be a luxury. It should be accessible to anyone, I think. And like you said, it's in everything. But I think there's a difference between like you said, the poster of art, of film and media and TV, and that has the money behind it, and then individuals just trying to
express themselves.
Yeah. It feels the same, but it
isn't.
It's kind of a different beast.
One of them is made with the intention of making money. The other is made with the intention of being creative.
Yeah, I guess, like, just trying to find a way in life, and I still struggle with knowing which of those paths is for me. So I imagine I'll be in the perpetual cycle with this for forever. But it just feels too important for me. If I don't have it in any way, if I've got no way to do my art, or at least believe that I'll be able to do it in the future, that I just get really fed up. Like,
would that be something you'd say to other creatives who are maybe in a similar position, where they have a set of skills, they're good at what they do, making it viable? So at the moment you're working and doing Miserable Beasts.
Yeah, I'm trying to juggle it.
Would you say that's like I'm trying what I'm trying to say here, like, does art need to be your business if you enjoy it?
I don't think so, but from my same perspective, there'll be times when I do think so. Like, the job that I'm doing now, it's kind of early days, but I still can imagine getting a year down the line and I will be feeling very much the same, of being like, oh, why couldn't I make this work? Like, why couldn't it not support me? Why could it not be my business? Like, I'm actually lucky the people at my work are so lovely, and it's like the nicest environment I've ever actually worked in. I've had not great experiences with being employed before, because I've just not really got on with the people I work with, which has made, not got on, but I just felt like I haven't fitted into the environment very well. So that's made me very anxious about being employed. As someone who is very, very introverted, like, I do find it hard to persistently be around people. But I think the store that I work in at the minute has got a lot of people that are very similar to me. So a much calmer environment for me, because I kind of understand other people are feeling the same way. But yeah, I want to say it doesn't have to be your business, but I definitely, I'd be lying to myself if I didn't have that pressure on me. I think it's nice and easy to say, oh, you do it because you love it, but there feels more pressure than that for me, and I'm sure it is for a lot of other people as well. So yeah.
Moving away from the financial stuff, because it's not always very fun, and back to the, you do a lot of different mediums. Have you ever tried to do a project, when you're doing a project, how do you choose what medium that's going to be? Do you try illustrating it and then go, actually, nah, I'm gonna make a model this time. Do you know what? I'm gonna take a leap and do it in 3D. Or
yeah, Yeah, I guess this is like kind of like on the edge of where all my abandoned projects are. Like, I think a lot of things I still need to very much upskill in, and I have a lot, because I've spent a lot of time and I've acquired a lot of skills in one area. My expectation of myself when I try something new is a lot higher than what like I can actually achieve just off the bat. So a lot of it is to do with like how skilled I feel, and sometimes having too high expectations of myself is what leads to things being abandoned, because I don't get the, oh yes, this is great, or I hit a hurdle and I'm like, oh my god, can't do that, so then I go back to something else. But I tend to go with what I just want to do, and I don't, it's like a bit of a, or maybe it's a bit of an ego, it's definitely a bit of an ego thing that I sometimes will think, oh, I want to do it, therefore there's no reason why I can't do it. And in a lot of ways that has helped me through a lot of hurdles. Like, I've learned a lot of things and I've found things out because I've not been afraid to try stuff. But sometimes I'm like, oh, you need to check yourself, because why would you think you could just do that instantly? Like, it's super hard. And the digital 3D stuff has definitely been a bit of a punch in the face with that for me, because I was like, there's no reason I can't do this, but my god, there's a lot to learn on there. So you know,
at the same time though, you have done it. And you know,
done it, but I need to keep doing it. You know, there's so much more. And I think, you know, someone that once said to me that, and it was something that sort of stuck with me a lot, that the more you find out about something, the more you just find out that you still don't know about it. And I think when I try new things, it's very much like that. Like, I think, oh yes, I've learned this, and all I actually see is the 10 million other things I haven't learned yet, and that can get a bit overwhelming. Like, it's hard for me to keep up the like satisfaction, because I'll see something that I've done, but I also see all the mistakes, all the things that could have been better, and all the time and effort that I need to still put into that, which then gets in that cycle of like, oh, but that's going to take time and you need money, and should you be doing this instead? So yeah,
and that's
the kind of perpetual
nature of having a skill.
Yeah. I always want to grow it. Like, I get a big buzz off it and I'm addicted to it, and I like learning new stuff, and that's why I dabble in everything. But every time I dabble in something, like just go in there like so bold, like I'd be able to do it, I'm just like, oh my god, like I need to put time and effort into this. And now I've got 5 billion things that I need to put time and effort in, and 2 days a week to do it. So yeah. And
do you create that sense of it as a need, that you know, you start these projects and it becomes, instead of I want to do this, it's I need to do this, I've started it, oh god, it's still there.
I think that's kind of where it gets a bit dangerous, or things get abandoned, or I start to feel inadequate, or like a failure, or like I'm just not doing enough and I need to be doing more and more and more. And you know, sometimes maybe it's not that I need to be doing more and more and more, it's just that I'm just spinning too many plates, and I should probably just put some down and focus on one thing. So like I said before, I'm really hoping that having a few people now in my life that are like real people that I can actually meet in person, because I've not had that for a while, will sort of help me with like the accountability, and just give me a bit of sort of positive feedback on like the progress I am making, because when you're your own only critic and it's only you, you can get a little bit like, you can get a little bit like, oh, what's the point? This is never going to be. And you know, but if you showed someone else that, oh, like that's going really well, and God, maybe throw some ideas back, and you think, oh yeah, or even that, just that expectation that someone's expecting to see something from you might just push you over that a little bit.
And with those like abandoned projects, do you find yourself going back to them, or are you more focused on future, I'm going to do something new still?
Occasionally I do go back to them, and I have gone back to things and it's worked out well, and actually taking a break from it has made it go better. but sometimes I just get a feeling about things and I just look at it and it just goes in the bin. Like it's like I need that gone, I need that off the plate. And it depends how I feel about the project. It's kind of like how much effort I've put into it or how I was feeling about it at the time it got abandoned. But yeah, sometimes I think stepping away and going back to something can give you a better outcome in the end, but sometimes I can put a lot of work into something and then just see it sitting there and just think that just needs to be gone. It needs to be gone off the desk, it needs to be deleted off the computer, it just needs to not be there so I can move on to something that is going to work. So yeah, some get left and gone back to, but some are just like, no, it needs to go.
Is that sort of valuable lesson you tell other creatives, is don't get too attached to your projects? Or at least if they're not doing something for you, don't get too attached to it.
Yeah, I think for me, I kind of know, like it's a very gut feeling about whether I feel good about something or not. And yeah, I think if you feel attached to it, then that's okay to be attached to it. Like it's probably for a reason. There's probably still something in it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I've also I can be very impulsive in decisions, and if I've just decided that something is done and it's gone, then it has to be gone. And I've had that like in jobs before where I've just been like, I just can't do this, I need this to end. And that is part of my personality, that is it can be good and it can be bad. Like a lot of the time I think I've cut off opportunities too soon, but you know, sometimes it saves myself from like prolonged discomfort, I guess.
It's a generic sort of question, but it always intrigues me, this idea that creatives and artists, to produce meaningful work, need to go through some sort of discomfort or trauma. It's like, do you find that with the struggles that you've had with your mental health or feelings in yourself, is that your artistic sufferance, or do you think that's a load of nonsense?
I think for me, like obviously people are people and everybody has a different experience and everybody's life is different. It's made up of different things, different memories, and obviously for me, I only can really make art based on my own like version of things. I can only really put out what I've got in my head and in my mind. So for me, I think obviously I've had some things that I found hard, but I do think it's something I don't necessarily agree with, because I don't really agree with this getting into like struggle waters about who's had things harder and who's I think when you start talking about people's struggles being like an inspiration or like a thing, or like, oh yeah, they did this with that trauma, I feel like that can alienate people who might have had things they want to express, but just they don't feel like it's not as traumatic as this.
As important, they've not had their trauma, but they're still,
Yeah, I feel like people should be able to express their feelings and their views and whatever that is. And I don't feel like, this whole picture of like artists needing to be traumatized is, I think that alienates a lot of people's experiences because they don't feel
worthy,
valid space maybe, or valid enough for what they've been through. But
I completely agree with that, and the thing that I often think is that argument has to have come purely from critics who've never actually spoken to an artist. As much as I'm happy to speak about my own things, like I definitely feel like that. Like I'm not trying to say, this is this because this has happened. Like I said, I'm only being open just in case someone else has been through something and they want to talk about that, and because that's my experience. But I definitely think I don't agree with the whole, you have to be traumatized to be an artist, because I don't think comparing trauma is healthy in any way. Like everybody's got their own version of, how they perceive the world, and that's, if people want to create art based on that, then to me I feel like it's always valid. The other thing that are sort of related to is, Pendleton Ward, who the creator of Adventure Time and stuff.
Oh yeah.
So he I can't remember where he said it, but he was being asked about how he comes up with the sort of things that are in the show and all that, and the assumption and the projected view is that he must be high when he comes up with some of the stuff. He needs some sort of substance kind of thing, and he's like, nah, I'm a sober guy. I've just got an imagination. It's like, but it's this idea, I think, does belittle people's creativity, that they need to either have a direct thing that causes them to be creative rather than it being something summative or internal, where it's their life experiences, it's their joys. So, but I wanted to ask you anyway,
I've definitely seen that on a lot of comments on artworks that are a bit out there on Instagram, people being like, oh, were you high when you made this? And I was like, because I've never, I have enough
stuff going on.
It's just not something that I particularly resonate with or whatever. But again, people are people and their lives are their lives, and it's the best thing about that is that everybody's got a different perspective and a different experience. So I think that's, for me, what is the exciting thing about art, is that you get to see someone else's life a little bit, because you're only you and you've only ever been you. Do you know what I mean? You've only got the memories that you've got, no matter who you are. So people putting things out there, you get to see a bit of something that you don't have, and I just think that's great for whoever wants to put something out there. And
putting stuff out there, social media is sort of hand in hand with being a creative in modern times. Does that ever put you off to being creative? Like, you're working on something, you think, oh, I should be making a reel right now, I should be making a post.
I think the pressure to post and the pressure to have things and the speed of the whole social media, the speed of the expectation that things are going to be churned out daily, and that is not the reality, and that's definitely had a negative effect on me. I was actually saying to my sister this morning that while I'm trying to do things, I'm really having a hard time knowing how long things are supposed to take. And I do think some of that is through social media, this pressure to post every day, that you start skewing the lines and feeling like you have to rush things or finish things before they're ready, because it's there expecting something from you all the time. But where I'd want to be, or the things I want to achieve are going to take time, and they're going to take longer, and it is hard to get that out of my head, I've not posted, I'm going to lose relevance, and it's really annoying stuff, because it's nothing to do with how I feel about the art. And I think social media has been great because it has given artists a platform, and it's given people a platform they never would have had. A lot of my dolls go to America, and there's no way I'd have had that audience without social media. But at the same time, it does become a bit of a trap where you feel like you can't take a break from it, or you feel like you have to keep it up. So I think it's a bit of a double-edged sword, and I know all the stuff going on with social media at the minute.
People moving to Cara, and
we're not. The AI thing is another minefield in itself. But I do think it's important for people to create, and I believe in artists more than anything, to be honest, and I believe that they will keep making, because I don't think people cannot, and it's just about whether putting stuff out there all the time and the need to be seen, it plays into people's sense of self and identity.
It's a human need to create, and even if things aren't really good to facilitate that, people will do it anyway. I mean, you see, even in war zones, whatever, people will find time to, and the energy to create something, to say something. So it's just whether the social media doesn't, although it's essential for artists, there's not really a social media site that really supports them.
No, I think I think there's so much art out there, and there's so many platforms for it, and there's so many ways of expressing it, and there's quite a difference between artists who work in those entertainment industries and artists who, you know, do like the market circuits and they're selling like small prints and stuff. Like, I think reaching those two different audiences are, you know, very different, and I can definitely see the split in that at the minute, you know, between people moving to more industry-based sites or people still struggling with the reach because they need to reach real people who will buy prints, and it's very, very different. And I think at the minute, from what I'm seeing, like a lot of people are not understanding how different artists work for what area they're working in. So yeah, I do think there's a bit of a, well, it's easy to see that the social media's kind of
a bit of a mess
at the minute, isn't it? But I guess that for me is just giving me a sign that, like, do you know what, maybe it's time to just take a step back and take the time and just not bother with it for a while, you know, and just try and work on something and get something to a point where, you know, I can show other people, I can show people in my life. And if Instagram has gone to shit or whatever has happened by the time I've finished a project, like, just like to think there's other platforms, you know. I know people like can find artists through like Patreons and Kickstarters, and there's all sorts of other ways to find people other than Instagram now. So
you've got to network yourself. Across. Being someone who works in physical mediums, that's another. Did you find that another barrier to engaging with social media and everything? It's the fact that you can't just pull a JPEG or set a screen recording for a time lapse. Yeah,
I absolutely hate taking pictures of my work. Like, I'm not a photographer. I don't like it. It never looks like what I think it should look like. And there's a lot of time and frustration trying to take pictures of things, especially some of the puppets, like the big, I'm just in a small flat, like I can't get a good setup for it. I'm like, I don't want all this junk. No, my piles of washing in the background. Like, I'm trying to stick up pieces of paper to make it look professional, but I'm like, I absolutely hate this. I hate this part, and it does suck away from, I've made this great thing, and then you're like, for God's sake,
now I can't just
post that. I have to
spend an hour.
Yeah. So that's definitely a thing, but also in a way that, you know, handmade things can't be made by AI yet, so that feels like something that is like a little bit protected in a way. But yeah, having to ship things out and worrying if they're going to be broken, they're like quite delicate, high priced items that you've only got one of. So like I said, a lot of the people I send them to are in the States, so just like I'll send them off and then I'll be like, oh, for God, please arrive. Like just waiting a week and hoping that I've packaged it safe and it's not been it's not like it's off again, do you know?
So I guess I'm moving away again from art stuff, but the fact that if you had an Etsy or whatever, you sell through your own site, but even on Etsy, it's filled with wholesalers now selling things that are meant to be handmade. So even that market is getting invaded by mass production.
It's absolutely true. Etsy. I did briefly have an Etsy, but do you know what it was? It was the pettiest thing that all the photos had to be cropped landscape, and that was not good for me, because I do puppets that are like the longest thing. I was like, I don't want to put my work on here and have it like cropped out like that. So that's the pettiest reason why I didn't have Etsy in the first place.
If you don't want your marionettes to look like they're in a Western, you know.
They're too tall for the box. So yeah, I never really had it, but I did used to use it to, like, you know, buy gifts and stuff and look for independent makers, but it is full of trash at the minute. Like, you have to root through a lot of the trash, and I think that's really unfair on the people that have built that platform. Like, it was built on
the back of creatives who were...
It was, and I do feel like a lot of things have been built on the back of creatives that are now being sort of pulled away, and yeah, it's not a great thing, but I still believe that people will, find a way to fight back and still be them, because I do believe that people want to see human things at the end of the day. Like, people will get bored of
mass-produced.
Generated things. I'd like to think there's purpose for everything, but
I think you're probably right.
Yeah.
And being again someone who works with a lot of physical mediums, do you think that they're having a bit of a resurgence since COVID? A lot of people picked up a hobby, a lot of people picked up some sort of physical craft, and then hence why there's tons of people making crochet.
I think people love a craft, and I definitely get a lot out of it, sort of doing things with my hands. I find that pretty satisfying to be able to make something, or I see something appear, and I think it is kind of back to that sort of that culture of like very mass-produced, fast things. Like, when you've made something yourself and you've not had to go out and buy it, and then you've got a thing that is yours purely because you made it, and there's nothing else like that, and you couldn't go out and buy it if you tried. I think there's something really, really satisfying about that. And I think in COVID, when people couldn't go out and buy things for fun, and they couldn't, it was nice to try new things, and I think that was such a great thing. But showing that when everything was taken away and people did have more time, how many people did choose to start creating who didn't create before? I think that kind of says a lot about what people would like to do if they weren't, constantly tied into trying to keep the bills paid and keep themselves alive,
So more need for more creativity or time to create.
Yeah,
nice.
I think it's good for people, and it helped a lot of people through COVID, because there wasn't really anything for a lot of people at that time. So it was nice to see people trying things they'd not tried before. And I really believe in, like, if you've got the opportunity and you're lucky enough to have the opportunity and you want to try something, then it's worth trying. Like, if you fail at it, fail at it. I've failed at loads of things. Like I said, projects have just been way, way low of my expectations, and they've just gone in the bin. But like, I still think anything's worth trying. Like, if you've got the feeling you want to try something and you've got access to it, and you can do that, then why not?
Why not? I think that would be a good note to end on there. If you've got something to do it. There's no reason not to. So thank you very much for coming and talking to me and being on what might be the first one of these. For people, if they want to find you on things, Instagram the best one?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, Instagram is probably the easiest one to get me through. It's what even is my Instagram?
So there's @miserablebeasts.
@miserable.beasts.
@miserable.beasts. And you also have your own website. We'll put a link into the description if you're watching on the YouTube. Cool. And other links. Thank you very much for coming on. And
no problem. It was nice. Yeah.
Good.